In this video, I'm just going to cover the gauge installation for 3 gauges I purchased from Glowshift. I will be installing a low oil pressure sensor, a high oil pressure sensor, and a water temperature sensor in my truck. It's a triple gauge, and it's going to be going on my A-pillar using Glowshift's triple gauge A-pillar mount. Here, I'm just going to show you the wiring I used. Obviously, I have 3 wires coming from each gauge that is responsible for sending the sensor signal to the gauge. I have that running down here between the A-pillar and the dash. Now for the power, the electrical power to each gauge, I went ahead and daisy chained each gauge together so I didn't have as many wires running down here. So what I've done here is, you see 4 crimp connections here. That's where I've matched up each color wire from each gauge. Coming out one end of the crimp, I've got these matching color wire from 2 gauges, and coming out the other end of the crimp, I've got these matching color wire from the 3rd gauge, along with the 4 wires that are going to run down through the dash. Those I've actually wired using speaker wire, 2-line speaker wire, so I only have 2 wires going down between the A-pillar and the dash. Just makes it a little bit easier for doing the wiring. I won't go over this in detail, but here at the fuse box is where I've put in some ATA circuits with the ATA fuse lines. And I did that in the past when I installed a triple gauge, which measures my EGTs, my boost, and my fuel pressure. So I basically took apart the old connections that I already had in there, and then I matched up the same color wires again and crimped it all back up. I want to keep things clean under the dash going to the firewall, so I've put this wire protector on all of the cabling, and then here you can see where I'm running out through the firewall. Down here by the oil filter is where I installed the first sensor, and that is the low oil pressure sending unit. And what I simply did was remove a 1/8 NPT oil port plug that was already installed here in the engine, and I put in the Glowshift sensor that came with the kit. Then I made sure to protect the wire going up to the gauge, as it gets pretty close to the exhaust there, as you can see. For the high oil pressure sending unit, I purchased the Pigtail harness from Glowshift, and I plugged it into the ICP coming off the driver's side head on the 7.3 here. And I took where the truck was plugged into the ICP and I plugged into the other end of the Pigtail harness. Here is where the Pigtail makes a Y, and I butt spliced the wires of the harness to the wire going to the back of the gauge. Put some shrouding on that wire and ran into the firewall. The last sending unit I installed was the water temperature sensor, and I simply took out the 3/8 NPT plug that was right here below the thermostat housing on the 7.3 engine. I did purchase an adapter that went from 3/8 NPT male to 1/8 NPT female, so that I was able to simply thread in the temperature sender that came with the Glowshift gauge. And as you can see, I ran the cabling up here around the side of the plastic cover there and up towards the firewall. To mount my gauges, I purchased the triple pillar pod from Glowshift. That's going to go on my A-pillar. It actually doesn't replace the stock A-pillar trim, but it will attach to that trim and allow me to mount the pods. Came with these little screw caps to cover the screws that will fix it to the standard A-pillar trim. So I went ahead and, this came black, I went ahead and sanded it down and primed it, and then I went to Sherwin-Williams, got some interior automotive paint that will match my burgundy interior. So here's my 4 locations for the screws to keep the pillar pod mounted to the A-pillar trim. I'm going to go ahead and take it apart now because the pillar pod actually covers some of the screw locations that hold the A-pillar trim to the A-pillar. So I'll take it apart, mount up the A-pillar trim, run the wires for the gauges through these holes that I've drilled in the back of the A-pillar trim, and then we'll connect everything up. Alright, they're installed. Headlights on, they dim. We're good to go. The last step is to apply the sticker that comes with the package. This makes the gauges about 5% more accurate.